Hi Parker Panthers, this is Mrs. Warren again. I don't know if you heard the news today, but I saw that schools will not reopen until the earliest would be May the 4th. So we've got about another month more of this distant learning that we're going to do. So hopefully you're getting into the habit of watching the videos and going into Clever and doing your work. I know Mr. Haran sent out a schedule. He does it every week where you get to see what we're working on, and he also kind of talks about who's doing what in math class as well. So when we were last reading Quest at the end of chapter 4, we have Molly, who has made the decision that she is taking Guest and going to the Darklands to try to find the kind folk so that she can trade him for her baby brother Thomas, who, as you know, was taken by the kind folk. She has gotten into the area of Mirkwood when she sees a strange man. He's playing a tune and she doesn't really know, is this going to be a good guy? Is this going to be a bad guy? She's not sure. So as we begin chapter 5, let's find out who this guy is. Chapter 5. Up close, the man was neither handsome nor ugly, neither old nor young, but somewhere in between. He wore a faded black hat with a wide brim. The sleeves of his green jacket were frayed, the fabric faded. The knees of his pants were patched, and his boots well worn. A shapeless pack lay beside him. I came nearer, but not too near. He had the sly eyes of a clever fox, I thought, and I wasn't sure if I could trust him after all. Guest pushed himself up to see over my shoulder. He burst into a series of loud clicks and clacks. He can't talk, I said, but the stranger paid me no mind. Instead, he imitated Guest, as if he were mocking him. Mocking is another way of saying making fun of him by doing what Guest was doing. Guest's eyes glowed, as if someone had lit a lamp in his brain. He waved his thin arms and bounced up and down in his sling until I feared he'd knock me over. Crowing and chirping, the two of them chittered and chattered until the trees around us echoed the din. My head ached with the sound. Finally, the man raised his hand and turned his palm toward Guest. Immediately, Guest fell silent, but his gaze was fixed on the man. "Were you talking to him?" I asked. "Ah, I was just fooling with them the way you might meow at a cat." The man shifted his sly eyes back to Guest. "He's an odd baby if ever I saw one, and no kin to you, I'm sure. What do you call him?" "Guest is his name." "Guest? A strange name for a strange baby." "It's what he is, a guest in our home." And where are you taking him so far from any house?" "I hope to find his people. Travelers they are." Travelers they are. He's outstayed his welcome at our house." The stranger asked too many questions, and I was giving him answers as fast as he asked for them. He had a way of drawing words from my mouth, like a conjurer doing tricks with scarves and coins. This guy asked a lot of questions. Didn't we already meet somebody in this book that asked a lot of questions? I wonder if there's a connection between the two of them. I see. The man rocked back and forth on his hands as if he were thinking this over. "The travelers left him with you. Is that the way of it?" Hitching Guest higher up on my back, I said, "Yes, that is indeed the way of it. Though it's been a pleasure to know you this little bit, we must be going now." "You're seeking the..." He paused a moment and grinned once more like a clever fox. "The travelers, I believe you said?" "Aye, the travelers." I moved to the side to step around the man, but he stepped the same way and blocked me. Feeling frightened now, I said, "Please, sir, let us go by." Without moving, he said, "Perhaps I can help a wee lass deep in Mirkwood, far from home, and toting a big baby that weighs as much as she does." "I've done well enough so far without your help." But do you even have an inkling of where these so-called travelers might be? Somewhere ahead, not far, I'm sure. I stood my ground but shivered with cold. The heavy air of night had begun to sink into the forest like a dark fog, filling the spaces between the trees and making it hard to see. I was so tired of walking, so tired of carrying guests, and hungry. My belly craved to be filled with cheese and bread. It seems you're too weary to take another step, the man said. Sit you here by this rock, and I'll make a fire to drive off the evening chill. There's a pair of skinned hares in my sack, ready to cook for supper. Will you join me? My head told me not to say yes to the stranger's offer, but my belly shouted, yes, sit down, let him build a fire, let him cook the hares, eat, get warm, rest. And so hares are another word for wild rabbits. And so I slid the sling off my weary shoulders. Guest crouched beside his new friend and peered into his face as if to memorize every feature. I sank down on the ground and leaned against the mossy rock, which was not as soft as it looked, but also a bit cold and damp. But it felt good to watch the stranger lay by a fire. When the flames leapt up, sending a fountain of sparks into the dark leaves overhead, the man turned to me. You've never told me your name, he said. Nor have you told me yours. He smiled and spitted the hares. As they began to cook, the smell of roasting meat made my stomach rumble. Will you or won't you tell me your name? He asked. Only if you tell me yours. I knew better than to tell a stranger my name unless he told me his. Knowing a name gives you power over its owner. Sorry, it says I don't have a lot of battery left. Hopefully I have enough to get to the end of the story. The man leapt to the end of the chapter. The man leapt to his feet and bowed. I'm called Madog Ash Esquire, a wanderer by choice with no place to call my own, as at home in a forest as in a village, perhaps more so. Hopefully you guys heard that over the plane. I didn't get up, and even if I had, I wouldn't have returned his bow with a curtsy. I'm Molly Cloverall from the village of Lower Hexham, just over the way from Upper Hexham. And your people, who are they? My father is Sam Cloverall, a father, and my mother a farmer, and my mother is Agnes. And why have they sent a wee lass such as you to return the traveler's baby? I shrugged. Someone had to take him. And what do you aim to get from the travelers in return for their baby? Madog asked. Nothing. Nothing at all. I just want guests to be gone forever from our home. Why is it I feel you're hiding something from me? I picked up a stick and poked at the fire. Guest squatted beside me and began pinching my arms. I swatted his hands away, and he nipped my cheek with his little teeth. Ugh, still is kind of mean. Madog made a sharp noise and clapped his hands. Immediately, Guest reached out to him and began his babble of strange sounds. Come now, Molly, this is no traveler's baby, Madog said. Why lie about it? He's a changeling left with your family by the kind folk. Did you think I wouldn't know his true nature? I took the roasted leg of hare Madog offered and began to gnaw the meat from it, though tough and stringy as it was. I said what I said, for some people have a strong dislike of changelings. You don't seem to like him much yourself. I despise him. He's hateful and nasty, and he drove Dado from our house and wore my mother down to almost nothing. But you see, it's my fault the kind folk took my brother, and I plan to set things right again. And how do you plan to do that? Well, if you must know, I mean to swap the changeling for my brother. Madog shook his head. I'm a man who knows much more about the kind folk than you do. He leaned across the fire to see me better. His eyes reflected the flames. I turned my head to the side so as not to look into their green depths. A person could drown in eyes like Madog's. Medog stirred the fire so the flames leapt up again and lit his face from below. The kind folk will most certainly not trade your brother for the changeling. You best turn around tomorrow and go home. I cannot go home without Thomas. I reached into my dress and showed him the locket on its silver chain. I'll trade this as well as Guest for him. Medog startled me by jumping back from the locket. Put that away, he said. The kind folk won't give you anything for that. They cannot bear the touch of iron, nor can I or Guest. Keep it tucked away so as not to harm us. But it's not iron, it's silver. It's silver on the outside, but iron underneath. Show it to Guest. Don't touch him with it. Just hold it in front of him. The moment Guest saw the locket, he covered his face with his hands and began to howl as if I'd hurt him. I slipped the locket back inside my dress and looked at Medog. Iron is poison to kind folk and anyone who shares their blood. That includes travelers and changelings. Keep it close to you always. It will protect you from them and their creatures. Once the locket was out of sight, Guest began pinching and hitting me again. His teeth had grown sharp, and it was all I could do not to slap him. Thrusting the jug of milk into his mouth, I muttered, Go on, little pig, but mind you, there'll be no more when it's gone. Guest has teeth, Medog said. He should be weaned. Pulling a piece of tender meat from the rabbit's carcass, he held it in front of Guest. Try this. The changeling looked at the tasty morsel dangling in front of his nose. Casting aside the jug, he grabbed the meat and sniffed. Into his mouth it went. You see? Medog asked me. Guest won't starve. He'll eat what you eat, right enough. I watched Guest chew the meat and swallow it down. All that remained in my bag was a bit of cheese and a stale crust of bread. Not enough for me, let alone to share with him. Medog winked at Guest and began to speak again in sharp bits and bites of harsh sounds. Guest cocked his head as if he understood. Turning his yellow eyes to me, he said, Molly. He touched Medog's face. Medog. Pointing to himself, he said, Guest. His voice was high and raspy, and he spoke fast, but I understood him. He speaks better in his own language, Medog said, but he'll learn yours fast enough. He already understands more than you realize. Turning back to Guest, Medog lifted him to his feet. Show Molly what else you can do. For a moment the changeling stood there, wobbling a bit, getting his balance like an overgrown toddler. Finally, drawing a deep breath, he took one step and then another. After he tottered all the way around the fire, he collapsed next to Medog in a heap of scrawny legs and arms and gave me a sly grin. You little beast! I was so angry I almost slapped him. To think I carried you all this way! Medog laughed. For sure the rascal has more tricks than I do, and that's saying something. It's not funny. My back hurts from carrying him. He's heavy, and he wiggles and squirms and kicks and pinches. He made me stumble and almost fall over and over again. Now, Molly, don't be angry with him. How could he keep up with you? Surely a fox would catch him and gobble him up. I looked at Guest, annoyed that he tricked me. He's big enough now to keep up with me, and what fox would eat a bundle of skin and bones like him? Enough of this complaining, Medog said. You both come a long, hard way today, and this little scamp must be tired out. He raised his hand, palm facing Guest. Lie down and sleep. Without a word, Guest lay down on his blanket. His eyes closed, he breathed deeply and evenly, and he slept. I wish Ma'am had known that trick. She might have gotten more sleep. Sure enough, Medog leaned back on one elbow and stared at me across the fire. From what he tells me, I understand Guest has not heard one word from you, one kind word from you or your ma'am. She fed him and you watched over him, but neither of you ever had any thought except getting Thomas back. You, Molly, would have killed him if you dared. Don't deny it. We wanted our Thomas, I said in a low, shamed voice. Not Guest. Wouldn't anyone? At least we didn't leave him at the crossroads as some do. Sure enough, but a wee bit of kindness, was that too much to give him? You weren't there. You didn't hear him scream and cry without end. He was at Mam all day and all night, sucking like a greedy pig. No matter how much milk she gave him, it was never enough. He was killing her. My dog sighed. The poor pitiful creature wasn't made for human milk, hungry as he was, but the more they ate, the more his belly ached. Is it any wonder he screamed day and night? Why isn't he screaming now? He's drinking cow's milk from that jug you bought. That's all you had to do, you know. Give him cow's milk. Ugh, too bad you weren't around to tell us. My dog sighed. I didn't know you had him, did I? Well, I won't have him for long. I'll find the kind folks soon, and they'll take him. They will, and I'll go home with Thomas. He shook his head, and his shadow moved against the rock behind him. The ones you seek are far from here, and hard to find. They don't look kindly on mortals who cross the border into their land. Isn't Mirkwood their land? Isn't it where they live? Mortals and kind folk alike come and go in Mirkwood. The kind folks' land lays on the other side. If you know so much, why can't you take Guest and me to them? The kind folk bear a grudge against me. It would do more harm than good for me to lead you there, but I can tell you how to find them. The firelight played with his face, lighting his nose, then an eye, then his chin, making him waver as if he were a shadow himself or a ripple on water. Who are you anyway? Who are your people? Where do you come from? Let's say I'm a man you don't meet every day. And glad I am of that. Meeting one of you every day would indeed be misery. You're not the first to say that, and I'm sure you won't be the last. Stirring the fire, my dog created a fountain of sparks between us. Do you have dealings with the kind folk? I asked in a low voice. Perhaps. My dog drew his tin whistle from his pocket and began to play his mournful tune. Too tired to ask more questions, I stopped struggling to keep my eyes open. With a sigh, I lay down on it in the moss and ferns and fell at once into a deep sleep. If I had dreams, I did not remember them. And that is the end of chapter 5. So I will see you guys tomorrow with chapter 6. Have a good night. Enjoy the beautiful weather. And I miss you guys. Just want to make sure that you know that, okay? Bye-bye.